solar winds swept clean this planet 4.5 billion years ago. Earth thrived. Its natural elements helped it to flourish, and its bounty was for all to share. Then a life form of superior intelligence evolved, and for a while lived in harmony with the Earth. But paradise has been put into jeopardy. The motives are irrelevant. The consequences, severe. The remedy is written. The elements of life are clear.
Coming up in this episode, in a remote corner of rural England, a dramatic space-age structure is being built in an old clay pit. The Eden Project will be the world's largest greenhouse, and when it's finished it will house a tropical rainforest as well as a wide range of other ecosystems. The spectacular site has been likened to a James Bond movie set. For decades, scientists have been trying to invent an environmentally friendly and less expensive way to run cars. They've looked to battery power, even solar power. But a humble primary school teacher from Thailand believes he may have finally found the answer. And it's all got to do with coconuts. In 1999, in Kyoto, Japan, countries agreed to an average 5% cut in carbon dioxide emissions. Now it's decision time and tough negotiations are expected as ministers try to agree to make the necessary cuts. When whaler Ulf Ellingson first started buying blubber offcuts from fishermen, everyone in town thought he was crazy. Now he's on the verge of making a profit that his ancestors would only dream about. That's if environmentalists and Japanese consumer groups can't stop him and all this killing first. And fresh floods battering central Mozambique have reopened painful memories for Sofia Pedro, whose baby Rosita was born in a makeshift treehouse during catastrophic flooding. The story's coming right up in Elements. The green fields of the English countryside. Cows lazily grazing in the summer sunshine and birds singing. This is Cornwall in a remote corner of southwest England. But in the old disused China clay pits, something is stirring. In scenes reminiscent of a James Bond film, work is underway on one of the most spectacular structures of the new millennium. But rather than creating something intended to destroy the planet, the Eden Project is attempting the exact opposite. When complete, this will be the world's largest greenhouse, big enough to house the Tower of London. Inside one of two domes will be a tropical rainforest, a huge canopy of plants and products from the Amazon, West Africa, Malaysia and the Oceanic Islands. The second dome will reproduce the warm, temperate regions of the world, including South Africa, the Mediterranean and California. Eden is recognized as a fantastic feat of engineering. The humid tropics biodome spans 100 meters at the widest point and has no internal support. But then, this is a greenhouse without glass. A chemical film called ethyl tetrafluoroethylene, or ETFE, cling film to you and me, is very lightweight and importantly it lets in ultraviolet light. So if you're a plant that should have pink leaves, come in here. You will have pink leaves. And if you're a human that wants to get a suntan, you can get that in here as well. Construction workers who've erected the massive structure are all highly qualified climbers called RATs, or Rope Access Technicians. But they need to be, as nothing like Eden has ever been attempted before. The £80 million sterling project began 5 years ago and quickly captured the imagination of engineers, architects and environmentalists alike. The architect behind the scheme is recognised as one of the big four in Britain of the 1960s generation. Nick Grimshaw's work crisscrosses the world from an extension to Zurich Airport, an art gallery in Spain and a landmark bridge in the Netherlands, to a science museum in Missouri in the United States. He described Eden as a marvellous challenge and is keen to pursue the growing relationship between modern architecture and conversation. Remarkably, despite the vagaries of the English weather, crowds are flocking to Cornwall in huge numbers, and the domes are not even open yet. A tractor carries visitors on trailers down a winding path to get a closer look. The dull, damp day is quickly forgotten as Eden's creator, Tim Smit, warms to his subject in a recorded commentary.
My name's Paul, I'm going to be your driver for this run. Welcome to Eden. On the way around, you're going to hear a commentary. That'll be given by Mr.
It was his ambition, he says, to build a living theatre to tell the story of human dependence on plants. The site he chose conjured up images of Arthur Conan Doyle's Lost Kingdom and civilizations hidden in the crater of a volcano.
And most importantly, plants for the future.
He's in no doubt that Eden in a few years will be as famous as the Eiffel Tower or the Sydney Opera House. And when people see a picture of it, they will immediately say, Eden Project, England. These visitors to the site, which wasn't completed until the spring of 2001, are already making plans to return. Eventually, they'll be able to walk for 10 kilometres through tropical rainforests and warm, temperate climes with the same temperatures and humidity as the real thing. In essence, although the location is in England, it will be the real thing. An exhibition in the visitor centre overlooking the domes gives a taste of what's to come. The vegetables and fruits to be grown, of the need to tackle global warming, and of the huge dependency that the world's population has on plant life. One of the most popular stands in the visitor centre focuses on an ordinary household kitchen where, one by one, the items originating from or relying on plants to survive disappear, until even the cat has used up all of his many lives. This former clay pit in a quiet corner of the English countryside has been transformed into the most sophisticated giant conservatories anywhere in the world, home to 200,000 trees and up to 4,000 different species and varieties of flowers, fruits and vegetables. Let's hope that projects like Eden are not the only way of experiencing the rainforest and all they support in the future, because the frightening reality is that elsewhere in the world, a rainforest the size of Eden is destroyed every single day. Like most people, Kitty Manisikun says he used to worry about the rising cost of fuel, but not anymore. After several months of trial and error, Kitty has developed his very own homemade petrol. The main ingredient, recycled coconut oil. He says his coconut fuel is just as powerful as diesel, but much cheaper and cleaner to run. The idea came from southern Thailand. Kitty says he heard about a man there who was using his coconut oil to power cars, so he decided to give it a go. He started with pure coconut oil, but found it wasn't very effective. So he began mixing various substances with the oil and soon found that kerosene and some other secret ingredients mixed together created a liquid just as good as petrol. It took 2 months to develop the right formula, and he's had no problems with the fuel ever since. It's even better for the environment. The oil has no sulphur, iodine or other pollutants and therefore burns cleanly and efficiently. The coconut oil comes from Kitty's coconut farm. He also buys used coconut oil from locals and recycles it. Most people in the province use the oil for cooking, but Kitty discovered the recycled oil is just as good as the pure coconut oil when it comes to making fuel. He makes about 300 litres of his coconut fuel each week, enough to power his truck. It also powers a boat and several engines which his family used to oxygenate water on their prawn farm. Kitty says a trip in his truck to a nearby village used to cost him about $16 US, but now costs just half that. Kitty isn't interested in profiting from the idea. He'd prefer to share his knowledge by teaching locals how to make the fuel themselves. The price of coconuts in Thailand has fallen dramatically over the past few years, and many farmers are struggling to survive. Kitty hopes his idea will help rejuvenate the industry. In recent years, floods have had a devastating impact around the world. 30,000 people died when a cyclone hit India, and hundreds of thousands of people in Mozambique were stranded by floods caused by a massive cyclone. Extreme weather around the globe has fueled speculation that the world is beginning to see real long-term changes in climate. Global warming caused by the buildup of greenhouse gases is thought to be the cause. Global warming is caused by a blanket of gases that envelop the Earth, raising its temperature. The biggest culprit is carbon dioxide, mostly given off when oil, gas and coal, or fossil fuels, are burned. Britain has seen extraordinary heavy rainfall and widespread flooding. While wary of blaming global warming for a specific weather event, climatologists see a pattern to the floods. About 100 years ago, there were maybe 3 severe floods each year. Now there are perhaps 6 severe floods each year. CO2 emissions for energy use increased 12-fold from 1900 to 1990. The 8 richest countries in the world, the G8, were responsible for nearly half the world total of CO2 emissions in 1990. 3 years ago in Kyoto, nail-biting negotiations finally led to industrialized countries agreeing to cut their CO2 emissions by an average of 5% by the years 2008 to 2012. The Alaskan tundra is a natural wilderness and at first sight appears untouched by predatory humans or the effects of climate change. But here, even subtle temperature rises caused by global warming are already laying waste vast areas of virgin forest. The temperature change doesn't kill the trees. The effect is more insidious. A parasite called the bark beetle is multiplying to an astonishing degree, destroying 90% of the trees in some areas of Alaska. Forests are becoming a controversial factor in the climate change debate at The Hague. Because soil and vegetation absorb carbon dioxide, some countries are hoping to use them as a way to avoid reducing their CO2 emissions. Countries like the United States propose buying up forest at home or abroad and offsetting the carbon soaked up by the trees against its CO2 emission quota. In Tasmania, Japanese companies are cutting down ancient forest and replanting the area with fast-growing plantations, claiming credit for creating a new carbon sink. Local environmentalists see this as a commercial scam which will only exacerbate CO2 emission. Another way some leading industrial countries hope to avoid actually cutting their greenhouse gas emissions is by buying up other people's quotas. The collapse of heavy industries in the old Eastern Bloc in the 1990s cut CO2 emissions in these countries. Nations like Russia and Ukraine are now looking to sell on their quota of saved emissions. the European Union is against this trade in carbon quotas. It's essential that countries like the United States of America take their responsibilities seriously, and that countries like Britain, as a friend of the US, continue to urge them to do so and to comply with the Kyoto Protocols. Climate change, as well as modern intensive farming, is blamed for the steady decline in the number of field birds like linnets and skylarks in Britain. The Royal Society for the Protection of Birds is taking a keen interest in the Hague Conference. Far from the political discussions in The Hague are the snowy Altai Mountains in Mongolia, home to one of the most endangered animals on Earth. There are only about 7,000 snow leopards left in the world. Now Mongolian Buddhist monks are helping to save this beautiful animal from extinction. While political leaders at The Hague grapple with the painful choices inherent in solving the problem of global warming, these are a few examples of the way individuals and local groups are facing up to what they can do. If governments are unable to come up with a constructive approach to resolving the Earth's problems, these local initiatives are the only hope. The town of Svolvær in Norway is as close to the North Pole as Siberia or Alaska, and the only industry here is fishing. Processing herring has been the Ellingsen family business since the 18th century. They've always bought fish from the local fishermen and sold it down south. But the youngest member of the Ellingsen's family dynasty, Ulf Ellingsen, found his customers thousands of miles to the east. From his post-war childhood and father's stories, Ulf Ellingsen was taught that whale hunting was essential for people's lives. Even the whale's blubber, a thick outer layer of fat, was used to cook or burn in a lantern, but there was never enough. But now Ulf has blubber to burn. A blubber mountain weighing 400 tons is kept in a giant freezer in temperatures as low as -30 degrees. It's all waiting to be sold to Japanese markets, since Norway pulled out of the trade ban under the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species. As the standard of life has improved, Norwegians have spurned the blubber, and much of it is discarded as a waste product. The Japanese, on the other hand, consider it a delicacy and eat it raw. At the beginning of 2000, Norway agreed to allow exports of whale meat and products for the first time since the mid-1980s. Norway has also resumed commercial minke whale catches in defiance of a moratorium by the International Whaling Commission, the IWC, but the domestic market has not provided enough demand for the whaling products. In Svolvær, the decision to allow exports was greeted with enthusiasm. The fishermen who catch small fish throughout the winter can't wait until the whaling season starts in spring and they can set out for their real jobs. Every part of the slaughtered animals is used, with the blubber coming from the underbelly, tail and back. The fat, about 1.5 inches thick, can safely be frozen for up to 5 years. To these men of the sea, a whale tugs no more heartstrings than a giant herring. What does upset them, though, are claims by Japanese consumer groups that private laboratory tests showed Norwegian blubber contained concentrations of toxins 5 times higher than the maximum permissible level. Claims that could finally ground the ships and the men for good. Last season, 37-year-old whaler Bjorn Andersen missed only once out of 14 harpoon shots he fired. The whales die instantly when the grenade carried by a harpoon such as this one explodes inside their bodies. This summer, Andersen boasts he won't miss a single shot. And as for claims of poisonous toxins in this waters, Ulf Ellingsen laughs them off smugly by saying, "You'll never see a whale with mad cow disease." The dramatic rescue of Sofia Pedro and her daughter Rosita, just 3 minutes after she was born in their makeshift treehouse above raging floodwaters, was beamed worldwide and came to symbolize the devastation wrought on the African continent. South African rescue helicopter pilot Chris Berlin said crew member Stuart Back had been lowered into the tree and only discovered then that Pedro was about to give birth. Mother and baby were taken to Chibuto, where police could ferry them to a nearby clinic. The rescue also sparked several Western nations to offer more helicopters, rafts and troops to help pluck exhausted and starving survivors from trees and rooftops, where some had huddled for days. While Sofia and Rosita appeared to come through their ordeal with barely a scratch, sadly Sofia's grandmother had died in the floods. The United Nations estimated that floods and a cyclone had left between 800,000 to 1 million people homeless and in urgent need of help, while thousands more were feared dead. This young mother's courage was matched by similar acts of bravery, not just from the victims of the flood, but from those trying to rescue them, from what was described as the worst flooding to hit the area for half a century. One year later, and Rosita plays on the new family farm, one of many donations from foreigners moved by her plight, while her family is preparing for a big first birthday celebration. Sofia said she was happy with the changes and the fame that followed Rosita's birth, but she was reluctant to discuss her private life. She did say that she hoped her daughter will grow well and go to school, after which she can decide whatever she wants to be. Sofia spoke outside her new 3-bedroom solar-powered house, built through private donor funds. Pedro's father-in-law, Bernard Mabayango, said the fame and fortune that attended his granddaughter's unusual birth were attracting jealousy from some neighbours, most of whom were living in small, grass-thatched huts a few kilometres from Rosita's treehouse birthplace. Pedro and her daughter were among 13,000 people rescued by helicopter crews and international rescue teams over a 10-day period as cyclones battered the country. Around 500,000 people are believed to have lost everything they possessed at a time when the country was finally taking its first tentative steps following many years of difficulty.